Hello, and welcome to another...
The English Couple. Hello.
Hello. Hello, Julia.
Hello, Richard.
We are going to be talking about a very thorny subject that a lot of people perhaps don't want to talk about, particularly in relationships. What is it, Julia?
It's the big D word.
Oh, dunce.
No.
No.
Go on, try again.
Dinosaurs.
Oh, close, but no.
Dungeons.
Well, close. Very close. Divorce.
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 We're not even married.
I know, exactly. I'm still not divorced.
Ah,
But
yeah.
you
I
are
am.
a divorcee.
I am a divorcee. Yes. It's a very interesting subject. So, what? I'll let you take the lead. Ask me the questions you want to ask.
Okay.
Let's see where we go with this.
Because obviously, I'm not divorced.
No.
You are divorced.
You're separated.
I've separated for, well, it's coming up
A long
for 2
time.
years now.
Yeah.
And the divorce needs to happen.
Definitely. See, when I separated, and we were separated for about 10 years, and we went our separate ways, and we didn't get divorced for a long time because of the fear of sorting out the children. We actually waited till all my children, because they were relatively old, were 18.
Yeah.
And then we didn't have to think about the custody. So
Yeah.
that was one reason.
Yeah, I mean, there's... Because up until April the 6th last year, that's 2022, it was all the blame game, wasn't it?
Yes.
Someone had to be at fault. There was 5 different things: adultery, abandonment, and others. I can't even think of them.
Yes, well, I was adulterous, I abandoned them, I beat them up, and I did the other thing, whatever that was. No.
I can't remember what the other ones are.
No, I can't remember now.
But, you know, so, I mean, that in itself makes things really messy if there has to be a blame put on someone.
Well, I suppose the idea of divorce is to make it very difficult as a very much last saloon decision. Because if it was too easy to just go, do you know what, we're not getting on, you know, in the eyes of the church, I think it's been designed so that you keep people together as much as possible.
I think it's more to do with law than the church, actually, with the blame game, because it's the courts then that get to decide whether you can or cannot divorce. Not now, of course, because now there is the no blame divorce,
which is a new...
It's a new thing. You can either be separated for 2 years and both, you know, file for it, or you can both file for it straight away, I think. Or if one person doesn't want a divorce and the other does, if you're separated for 5 years, then it can still be done. It's strange, but
I don't really understand that, because when I got divorced, we got divorced online.
yeah.
So we nullified our divorce online. It was possible to do. We had to print it out. We did have to go to a solicitor to identify who you were with an affidavit.
Sorry, nullifying is different to divorce, but go on.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Typical me, I used the wrong word for the wrong thing.
And typical me picked up on it.
Yeah. But we went for the clause where we were mutually agreeing. Now, that must have been about 10 years ago. Something like that, or 8 or 9 years ago. So it wasn't this new clause that's came out, but none of us had to blame each other. No one had to actually blame each other.
That's strange, because
we had to be separated for 6 years. It was something like that.
Or
3 years.
That's why.
So the separation clause. So we had been separated for a number of years, and that's what the option was. So yes, so now it's easy. You can just say we've both agreed to be divorced, and it makes it a nice clean break. And of course, if you've got children, you just have to agree on those terms.
It does. I mean, where you don't have to have a blame now, it means that the kids don't have to suffer as much. I think anyone doesn't suffer so much, because it brings a lot of toxicity, doesn't it? If you have to say, oh, that person did this, that person did that.
Yes. And then
and if you're both fighting for the blame, putting the blame on the other, then
yes.
Yes. Horrible mess.
And it doesn't, you know, all your dirty washing, as it were, doesn't need to end up in court. You can just say we've decided no longer to be together, and these are the arrangements we're going to have for the children. And in theory, it should go relatively smoothly, and it should save a lot of money as well, because
and a lot of stress and heartache.
Yes,
because it's hard enough separating and divorcing in the first place, isn't it? Don't you think?
Absolutely.
So. And it should be. It should never be easy. You know, it should be taken
And of course, one of the options that you get before you divorce is mediation.
Yes.
So that because if it's too easy, you could just go, oh, we had an argument last night, we decided to get divorced.
And they get married the next day.
Yes, and then go, oh, did we make a mistake? So it's a big thing to do that.
The thing is, people will do that anyway.
I'm sure they will.
They find ways of doing things like that anyway. And it's a weird thing, isn't it? Because, I mean, on the one hand, I definitely do believe in the sanctity of marriage and, you know, and trying to make it work. But, you know, there are many cases when it's like, well, why? Why are you forcing these two people to be connected in this way when, A, it's you know, not necessarily toxic, but they're not good for each other.
Yes. And people can often be stuck in the marriage because they fear the divorce process. Or they'll say, we'll stay at it because of the children. And then the children grow up.
Which is noble, but still, it's not always the healthiest and best thing for the children anyway.
Because how can you do anything for the children if you are yourself miserable? You know, if you're happy, you can provide happiness for the children and give them confidence and stuff going forward.
Happy people radiate happy.
Yeah. But if you're continually fearful... So I think it's good that there is this new divorce process. It's just knowing that it's the right thing. And as you say, I think some people will snap at it and go, well, we've got a toxic relationship, we should get out of it. But it depends on that relationship, because it seems to me that some people are 1 minute they hate each other and then they're all lovey-dovey again.
That is the weird thing with love. In love and hate, you know, if it can sometimes easily flip from one to the other.
Yes.
Not for you, though.
No, not for us, because it's never happened. We've never had a cross word, have we, you swine? I mean, you lovely creature, you. But of course, that's the thing, isn't it? There's a point where you understand how your relationship bubbles, and sometimes you just fall out with each other. Doesn't mean you've fallen out of love.
No.
You just got cross and annoyed and what have you. But that doesn't mean that you necessarily want to completely divorce. It's difficult for us because we're not actually married to one another.
That's not difficult at all, is it?
No. So we don't have to worry about that. But I suppose if you've got the hurdle of divorce, no matter how easy that hurdle is, it is the fact that you have to go through the process might save that relationship. Not so much, I mean, the marriage.
Sometimes it does.
Yeah,
you know?
Because you could have an argument and say, oh, that's it, I'm off. You go, and if you have no legal obligation to return, it may be that you're both being stubborn, but actually you both want to get back together, but you're both being stubborn and going, well, I'll let him do the first move, or I'll let her do it, and nothing happens.
No, and that's where, when mediation is brought in, that can be the saving grace.
Yeah.
But, you know, there are times when you get to that point and then you realise, hang on a minute, even mediation's not going to help this. This is, no.
And both parties have got to be willing to it anyway, haven't they?
Yeah. Oh, well, for mediation. Absolutely, mediation will not work if one party is absolutely...
But what about this new rule that says, what did you say, that there's no blame?
No blame.
So there's no one to blame, but say one person wants to divorce the other and the other person doesn't want to divorce.
There are means and ways.
There are means
and ways. So I did read into it. It was a few hours ago now.
Well, have you?
I've done a lot of thinking since then. I don't know. Put it simply. Okay.
Yes. I mean, presumably, nobody has the right to hold somebody to something if they no longer want to be in it. And if somebody says, I don't want to be married to you, and I refuse to be married to you, I no longer recognise it. It's a question of the legal standing of it. I suppose that's what separation is, isn't it? That's that process of being, right, I'm not married, I don't consider you my husband, but there may be legal ramifications that, yes, I'm still Mr. and Mrs., you know, even though I no longer recognise you. You're still the father of the children or the mother of the child. Oh, I've changed. I've had you've switched genders and all sorts. Yeah, I did funny things.
Don't worry.
No,
we know what you're talking about.
Yeah, they're still parents. You can't become not a parent if you've got children if they're still living.
Yeah.
So that's fairly basic. But yes, it is. But I think people are scared, aren't they? They're scared of going through it and then being a divorcee. What does that mean? Have I failed?
Yeah. Well, for me as a female, it would mean that I can't marry Prince William. Not that I can anyway, because he's already married.
Well, there you go.
I did once upon a time think that.
Want to marry Prince
William?
Well,
I did want to. Yeah.
He's lost a lot of hair, hasn't he? So
never mind that.
Understand that.
Hair's not everything.
No, well, it used to be. It is now.
With the right person, it's not a problem.
But some people just don't like that idea that I'm a divorcee. You know, just as because it's a strange word, isn't it? Divorcee. That's not as bad as spinster, though. That's a horrible word.
I know. All the female versions of all these different words are just awful. Such awful connotations.
Yes.
Poor
and yet,
women.
You know, spinster just means that somebody who's not married.
Yeah, it's because she's spinning. She's she's got plenty of time on her hands. I'm pretty sure that's where spinster came from, using the spinning wheel.
Right. Yeah. Well,
being a seamstress and everything.
Oh, excellent. Yes. So, but as you say, it is.
Doesn't bachelor have a completely different connotation?
Yes, a bachelor.
Bachelor's like, oh yes, it's a man about town. He's a free agent. Yes, yes, yes.
And is it right that if you've been married and then you get divorced, you can't be a bachelor again?
Really?
I don't know. Is it, or you're just a divorcee? Then?
I thought he was just a single fellow.
It's just an eligible bachelor,
yeah,
somebody who's available to be married. Potentially, or a good catch or something.
So in that stretch, a spinster would actually be a lady who's never been married.
Yes.
And is now in the later.
Yes, because I don't think a spinster can be if we were married and then got divorced and you were then single but a divorcee. Yeah. I don't think you'd be a spinster.
No.
And I don't know if that's a legal term, isn't it? Because you often see on forms you have to identify yourself as something, and you know, if it says you're single, well, I'm single. I mean, I know we're in a relationship.
Yeah. Legally, we're both single.
We're single, but I'm also...
Actually, no. Legally, I'm not single. That's the whole point of this conversation.
Oh, yeah. You're still married.
Face palm reset.
But if you're anyway, if there's an option between single and divorced, what difference does it make to a form on a thing? And I often go, yeah, I suppose I am divorced because I have been married. I'm no longer married. But that's nobody's business anymore, is it?
No.
It's
only
over.
If you choose to tell somebody, that's then their business.
I just said, I'll be
it's
single.
Still not their business.
I'll be single. So, yeah, so how easy for you then to get divorced? I mean, legally and on paper, we've just discussed that.
At the moment, even though I know how much easier... Oh, she's done the quote marks with her hands again. Even though I know that it's now easier to divorce and go through the process, even then, I've still been dragging my heels. I mean, I didn't get married lightly. I wanted to have married and stayed married for the rest of my life. Things don't always pan out how we plan.
Because it's a sort of fairy tale, isn't it? The marriage thing, the whole process.
You have the lovely wedding, you have the lovely man, you get, and you live happily ever after. Excuse me. But then you grow up and you realise, oh, life's not quite like that, is it?
The thing is...
Thanks, Disney.
Yes, thanks, Disney. Life is full of change, isn't it? Life changes and you fall in love with people, and people do this all the time, of course. And then as you get to know each other over years that you couldn't possibly know when you start, your appreciation of that person may diminish. They may do things that make you diminish. There are things like affairs and things like that, and that depends on how you feel about all of that. But there comes a point where if it breaks down and you realise, well, this isn't working, or you suddenly find somebody else who you think, actually, that person, I'd like to spend my life with that person. Why should I be destined to be in this relationship when I want this relationship? And the other person may also be in the same position but not have somebody, or just think, there's nothing better, so I'll just put up with what I've got. Relationships
are complicated.
Are extremely complicated, and trying to navigate through life in that way is very hard.
It is.
I think. And you need a certain amount of confidence, don't you, to be able to say, actually, I'm going to break this, because I think a lot of people they can put up with the devil they know rather than the devil they don't know. And people go from one relationship, they break it, they get divorced, they go and marry somebody else, that breaks down, and then they remarry the person that they were married to before.
That happens more frequently than one might think.
And that's, in my mind at the moment where I am, that's bizarre, because with all my relationships that I've had with women
Have you had relationships with... That's not a question
I've had friendships. I've had friendships with men.
Yes, good point. Good point.
Nice
save.
Yeah, thanks. But in those meaningful relationships in which one might have at some point thought about marriage, had you taken it more seriously, and they come to an end, to me it's okay to be friends, but I cannot in my mind ever think that I would try and rekindle something that had burnt out. Does that make sense?
It does make sense.
I'm glad, because I was using as many English words as I could in a sequence of events that would make the thought as clear.
And you did use them very well.
Oh, you're very kind. So it is a thorny subject, but I'd be interested to know what other people think about a divorce.
Absolutely.
And if they've approached it, and if it, I mean, obviously if it's messy, it's a hard thing to have a clarity about what divorce is, because if you're at each other's throats and you're at a slanging match and you just can't get the other person to communicate with you, then that's clearly a difficult position to be in.
It is a funny thing, isn't it? I mean, on the one hand, I do believe in the sanctity of marriage and, trying as hard, making a marriage work. But on the other hand, like I say, I find it pointless to force people to go through the motions when there is nothing to be saved. When the sum of its parts is devalued by the whole, that's kind of...
And then, of course, you've got the financial side of things, because when you're married, say you or your partner could do something that you both then have to accept responsibility for. Say, for example, on a house or something, if one of you's accrued a debt on the house, for example, for whatever reason, or hasn't paid the mortgage, or whatever it is, you're both responsible. If you're jointly owning that house in your marriage, which most marriages would probably be working out that way, then the other person, who may have nothing to do with the nefarious doings that have brought about those circumstances, well, whatever it is, if someone's borrowed some money, let's say, and they've secured it on the house, because it's in both your names, somewhere.
Sorry, you didn't need to clarify that.
No, but I'm just saying, you're legally bound because you are effectively one unit, aren't you? And so sometimes there's merits of being married legally, and then there's also merits of being just like at the moment we have. If you moved in here, for example, and this is what happened with my father, he didn't marry again when he got divorced. The lady who he moved in with, she wasn't particularly nice in the end. She thought she had the status of, what is it? The
common law wife.
Common law wife. Turns out that status is not a thing. And she had no rights to the house that he had spent all the money on. But she thought, because she'd been there for 20 years, that by default she would have rights to it. And she was rather surprised that she wasn't. Now, if she'd have been a nice person...
Then it wouldn't have been a problem.
It wouldn't have been a problem, because the beneficiaries of the house, once he died, would have treated her much more kindly. But as it turned out, she wasn't. And so they could just go, sorry, on your bike.
Yeah. And you've got to protect your family,
protecting your family. So, so the divorce is one thing, but I'm just trying to illustrate that there are a lot of legal ramifications and benefits on both sides, both being single and being married, of course. And then you've got the issue with the children, which makes it all more murkier.
Yeah, all the more murky.
Especially if one half wants to sort of say, well, I'll have that child, but not that one. It's like, well, hang on a minute. So, yeah, we'd be interested to read your stories and your thoughts on the thorny subject.
Whilst we're on the topic,
yes.
How many times have you ever been engaged?
I've only ever once been engaged.
Same.
And
how many times have you proposed?
My proposal was... I've only once proposed, if you can call it a proposal.
Yeah.
And it was in error, in a way.
Yeah.
I didn't really quite understand, because how it came about was I was seeing my ex-wife, before she was my wife, in a relationship, and Christmas was coming, and I just said to her, as we were in a relationship that you and I have, she was single, I was single, And I said to her, what would you like for Christmas? And she said, I'd like you in a bow. So I just flippantly said, oh, well, maybe we should be engaged then.
Not realising.
Not realising. I just thought, I was naive, and I didn't realise that actually that was engaged to be married. I thought it was like
just an official relationship.
Yes,
status.
that we are now together,
and it is,
and you know, you get a ring and all of that. Because I don't go to marriages, you know, but people invite you to weddings. I don't go to weddings. I don't go to burials, funerals. Thank you. I don't go to these things.
How do you cope without me?
I don't know. I just really don't know. So I've never done those things, and I avoid those things, and I'm not really. I find them a bit weird. I don't know why. I think that's because the way I was brought up and the breakdown of my parents' marriage and stuff, and various other issues. So when I started to dawn that I had engaged to the lady I was with, I thought, okay, well, that's good. And we did. It took a while, but a year or so later, we decided to have a child before we got married. In fact, we weren't going to get married. We sort of agreed not to even get married, even though I'd effectively proposed, but I didn't go down on one leg, and I never used the words, will you marry me? I just said, well, I suppose we better get engaged. and so, yes, that's very shameful, I feel. I didn't give the lady the gratification to say, I won't marry you, or I'm, you know, I didn't ask the question.
Yeah, it's a funny thing. It's not, again, that's not as uncommon as you might think. It happens by accident, and then it happens.
And I think, sorry, I know I've dominated a lot of the conversation, but I think that a lot of that is because old traditions and customs have died out, in which families would have shown how the custom of marriage, and we would have known, you know, go back 100 years, that this is how you approach it. You ask the question, have you asked the question, have you got the ring, and do all that. We sort of know that in common stuff, but not everybody. And clearly, me as a slightly backward child didn't know that.
Yeah, and you're not going to ask, so I'll tell you anyway. I've been engaged only the once. I have actually proposed twice to two different fellows.
Oh, right.
Thankfully, the first fellow did decline. I was devastated, of course, and that ended the relationship because, you know,
But now he's a mass murderer serving time in Broadmoor.
No, I think he's actually recently got married.
Oh, right.
Now,
okay.
But, you know, I wasn't willing to wait that time because I wanted children.
I want children.
I wanted children. Thankfully, he declined, and that relationship, you know, ended there. We did try and rekindle about a year later, but as I said to him, it's like chopping down a beautiful oak tree, you know, and it doesn't matter how much you tend to that stump. It's not going to be what it was before, ever. Even if it does grow back, it's not going to be the same, you know.
No.
The same proper good tree. Anyways, so yeah. And I would say, well, I wish the second had declined me as well, but that is not true, because I am glad, you know, it's something I had to go through, I suppose, and I wouldn't have my beautiful two children.
I think it's interesting when people get to that point where they want to divorce and they say things like, I hate my wife and I hate all of this and I wish I wasn't married and all of that. And I always think, well, hang on a minute. There was a time when you did love that wife, or there were reasons to get married, and that you were full of all the joys of spring. And even though the relationship has come to an end, I still think that one should give the respect to your own, to you and your ex-partner, or your partner will be an ex, that you did have time together and it was important, but that you've moved on. It doesn't mean that you have to hate your memories.
Yeah.
You might, that you as a couple and that person may have changed, and that's true, you don't have to like the person, but those memories of when you were actually in love and you did things and all of that, I don't think that you should get rid of that, because
don't be toxic about your ex, basically, please.
Yeah,
people.
Because there was a time when and so you're just ending the relationship, but of course things can get so awful that you cannot see through the red mist.
Yeah. I mean, it's one thing when you're in the moment of in going through the hard times and trying to sort things out. There's got to be times when you're like, oh, I really hate that person.
Yes.
You know,
yes, of course.
As long as you take a breath. I don't mean that. It's just really hard right now. But this too will pass, as someone very wise once told me.
Well, we've waffled on quite a bit about divorce, haven't we?
Yeah, we have.
It's almost as if we're very experienced in it. Anyway, thank you for watching.
I hope it was interesting, at least.
And yes, do let us know if you've got any stories or things you want to share with us. Then we'd love to see them.
We do love reading the comments.
So thanks again, and until next time.
Goodbye for now.